And another edition of lcpioneers.com live as we welcome you into our 4 day a week show, Tuesday through Friday at 11:30 on lcpioneers.com/live, facebook.com/lcpioneers. I am Ryan Goff. I am the play-by-play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark Athletics, and this is the second week of our show, trying to keep you in touch with folks from the Lewis and Clark community, former student athletes, current student athletes, people from the community, including Rocky Campbell, who was our guest yesterday. He is the director of the Career Center on the Lewis and Clark campus, and he kind of fits all of those bills too because he's a former student athlete and now a coach for Lewis and Clark as well. We welcome you in, invite you to get in touch with the show at LC Pioneers on Twitter and Instagram. You can comment below our Facebook Live video, and email is open as well, sports@lclark.edu. We are excited to have a guest today, our first alumnus that doesn't currently work for Lewis and Clark, but back-to-back alumni in the last 2 days. It's Maddie Lee. She's a class of 2015 Lewis and Clark softball student athlete who's now the beat writer for the Oklahoma City Thunder for the Oklahoman newspaper. We will talk to her about her experience as a Lewis and Clark student athlete, her path to becoming a journalist, and all of the stops that she made, including her most recent one. And as far as current events and why I am talking to you from my bedroom in Salem, Oregon, she was right at the kind of the beginning of the end of sports currently, the pause on sports, because the Oklahoma City Thunder were hosting the Utah Jazz when Rudy Gobert tested positive for coronavirus. And that kind of just slammed the door on the NBA season, postponed it, and a lot of other leagues followed suit. And now bringing it back home, Lewis and Clark student athletes not having their seasons because the Northwest Conference has completely canceled its spring schedule as well. So excited to get her perspective, help us relive that moment from her eyes, and then just hear what's been going on for her over the last 5 years or so since she left Palatine Hill as a student athlete. We'll be doing that in just a moment from now. If you don't know about Lewis and Clark, well, we hope you will. We are based in Portland, Oregon, compete in the NCAA Division III level Northwest Conference against schools from Northwest Oregon and throughout the state of Washington, and invite you to check out our website as well. We'll try to keep you updated throughout the entire time that folks are off campus. Our students are remote learning currently, professors, faculty, teaching their classes remotely. So we'll try to keep you as up to date as possible on lcpioneers.com. And right now, if you go there, you can see a campus tour video where you can go along with a couple of our coaches in a time lapse. It takes about 6 minutes to tour the entire Lewis and Clark College campus, and that includes our graduate school and law school. Our guest on Friday, Cassie Komtani, class of 2019, is currently a law student at the Lewis and Clark Law School, and she had a chance to tell us a little bit about that. That's right on the front page at lcpioneers.com. Our interview yesterday with Rocky Campbell is there as well on our YouTube page and on Facebook. You can see all the archives of our shows, plus the announcement of the Entrepreneurship Innovation Minor that is available to students at Lewis and Clark starting with the fall 2020 semester. I also invite you to go to lcpioneers.com/YLC, and that gets to the Lewis and Clark virtual visit page. And beyond seeing campus through a campus tour, you have a chance to do different online sessions with admissions counselors, folks in the Lewis and Clark community. And that includes coming up at 3 o'clock today, a campus tour with Ben Shearer, class of 2021. He'll walk you through the Lewis and Clark campus from a student's perspective. And then at 4:30, Instagram Live, there'll be an information session with one of the admissions counselors. And they've been doing a really neat thing where they'll bring in the counselor, but also a current Lewis and Clark student to talk to them about their experience as well. Our goal is certainly to try to keep you as connected as possible. If you visit lcpioneers.com/YLC, you can see that virtual visit from the Lewis and Clark College webpage as well. I invite you to get in touch. LC Pioneers is our handle on Twitter and Instagram, and in the comments below. Good to see some folks joining us as we welcome in our guest for today. She's class of 2015, former Lewis and Clark softball student athlete, and now she is a beat writer for the Oklahoma newspaper. Welcome in Maddie Lee. Maddie, we appreciate you taking the time to join us. I'm in isolation. I know you're in isolation. How have you been handling the change coming from a journalistic perspective?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. It it's been weird. Yeah, I'm in my apartment right now. I've been doing this since right after the game between that you just mentioned, the game between the Jazz and the Thunder, where Rudy Gobert tested positive. We then were quarantined for about 24 hours. And so since then, March 11th, the night of March 11th, I've been home with my dog and yeah, trying to dig up stories. It's kind of like off season, but with the added caveat that as we go into the off season, usually you have time to, kind of collect and have an idea of some long-term stories that you're going to work on throughout the summer. But with it ending so suddenly, obviously we did not have the chance to do that. So um, we've been getting creative. I wrote last week about a high school student who was part of Sam Presti, the Thunder general manager, his leadership program. And, that's a story that we wouldn't normally be able to get to during the season, but because we obviously don't have sports going on right now, we're able to dig into his story, and it was honestly very inspiring. And so we're getting creative and able to still do stuff like that, which has been fun.
We just showed your Twitter handle on our screen and links to articles and ways that you're keeping yourself busy. It's been a change for everyone, and it's certainly different as extroverted as I am, being home so much, but still trying to connect with people outside. What's neat about having you on too is, as I mentioned, you're just our second former student athlete, but the first who doesn't currently work at Lewis and Clark. So I haven't really had a chance to talk to anybody about that moment of graduation to where you are now. Describe your path post Lewis and Clark and how you got to be an NBA beat writer.
Sure. It's long and winding, even though it's only been 5 years, which was crazy hearing you say that. But I was a rhetoric and media studies major, English minor. So kind of, I knew when I declared that I was going to go into journalism, but obviously Lewis and Clark doesn't have a journalism program. So I was able to kind of bend those two majors into a pseudo journalism undergraduate, and then went to Northwestern for a year of grad school, studied specifically journalism there, got in all the, like the journalism ethics classes and stuff that we didn't have at Lewis and Clark, and then did a series of internships. And my first journalism, like full-time job that wasn't an internship, was actually covering high school sports in Owensboro, Kentucky. And I loved it. It was a blast. But since then, I've been able to cover Major League Soccer and some SEC football, and now here in the NBA.
I mean, that's really cool that you've kind of, in 5 years, had that broad of a range of experience because I've talked to a lot of people in the broadcast field about the way that this works. It's a lot similar to coaching, even officiating too, where you usually go to some of the most remote areas to get started. You're just taking any job and then you just kind of work your way up. And it sounds like with your experience at Northwestern, some internship opportunities. It sounds like you were able to kind of catapult yourself to something pretty big in 5 years. I mean, I commend you the fact that you're already in the
Thanks.
NBA. How did journalism become something that was important to you? Why did you know that that might be your path?
Well, it's funny because if you ask anyone who I went to high school with, they would have told you, like, oh, yeah, we knew from back then that she was going to become a sports writer. Like, it was obvious. I didn't realize that. So I had written on the sports staff in my high school. So obviously, when I went to Lewis and Clark, I started writing for the PioLog, but I really thought of it kind of as a side hobby. My plan was to go into sports medicine. I had Tommy John, I'll show you the scar. I had Tommy John surgery after my freshman year. So obviously, as a softball player, it's kind of a big deal to have elbow surgery. But I spent so much time in the training room, so much time with people in the sports medicine field. Shout out to PD and Tara and Jeremy in the Lewis and Clark athletic office. But because of that, I became a student athletic trainer. I started taking science classes. And then partway through, I realized that as much as I liked that, I was enjoying the stuff that I was doing for the PioLog more, and I never actually declared biology as my major, but kind of made the mental switch and the class course switch to go rhetoric and media studies midway through, and loved it. And I think that was a really tough decision because I was caught between two different worlds that I really cared about, but I think I made the right choice and haven't looked back since.
She's Maddie Lee, class of 2015, joining us on lcpioneers.com live. Petey, Tara, Jeremy, our current student athletes are also enjoying their tutelage, a lot of them working in the athletic training room as well. It's great to have those connections still at campus. Because the Thunder play in Portland, have you found yourself back at Lewis and Clark anytime since graduation?
I have not been able to make it to campus. It's funny because I have a beat partner and we split trips, but have been able to kind of take most of the Portland trips, which has been nice. But they keep having like back-to-backs and stuff when I'm in there. So it's a very quick turnaround, even when it's not a back-to-back. And so I've been able to still catch up with my former classmates and teammates and see them and eat some fantastic food, obviously, in Portland. But I haven't been able to go back to campus since I took this job. But hopefully this coronavirus thing will all pass and we'll actually be able to cover some basketball again soon and actually travel again soon. But definitely on the list.
Yeah, we're looking forward to those days as well. And it's currently student athletes who are missing their senior year to compete. Scott Pasapi, who's now our assistant women's basketball coach, says hi in our Facebook comments saying, had a blast going to school with you while you were at Lewis and Clark. And it makes me
Hi,
wonder,
Scotty.
you talk about all this path to get where you ended up being as a journalist. And I am curious, from the academic perspective, any specific things that you feel like Lewis and Clark taught you, whether it was from the curriculum or just the experience being a Division III student athlete, that helped you get either into Northwestern or to the path where you are now as a beat writer in the NBA? Was there a specific skill set or two that you really attribute to Lewis and Clark?
Yeah, I mean, so many things. I think first from the athletic standpoint, it's been hugely important in my career to be able to have the experience of, even if it's not playing at Division I level, like having played college sports and knowing little things that just come naturally and are obvious to student athletes. Like, for example, it drives me nuts when people will say, they see a guy who's on the bench and has, stuff wrapped around his knees and say that he's icing. Like, he's going back in the game. He's obviously not icing. It's obviously heat. Little things like that you just know from being an athlete, or like you've had the experience of playing terribly, like having your error be the one that costs the game. And so because you've had that experience, it's easier. You can tell that my athletic experience, I wasn't the best softball player in the world, but having those experiences, you can come into an interview with a guy who went through something similar and know how to approach that conversation. Whereas, a lot of other people haven't had that and don't know the best way to approach an athlete who's dealing with something like that. In terms of academically, I loved having the small class sizes. That was really fantastic for me. And like the English classes, actually also my media classes, and my English classes, being able to have so much back and forth and in-class discussion and editing really helped me be able to take constructive criticism and really work in tandem with my editors on making a story better. And I was able to present all of that when it came time to apply for grad school. And the Career Center, I feel like not enough people on the Lewis and Clark campus know much about the Career Center. It was fantastic. I spent so much time in there my senior year getting help on my resume and my applications, and that was huge.
She's Maddie Lee. She's a beat writer for the Oklahoman, joining us on lcpioneers.com live. We are Thursday through Friday, 11:30 on Facebook Live. Uh, it was while I was at the Oregon School Activities Association 6A basketball championships, an event I've done every single year, that as I'm broadcasting a game, I'm getting messages about NBA seasons postponed, and then the 5A tournament is postponed. And it just felt like this cascade of things that I had no clue, because all I'm doing is broadcasting a game. That's what I had to focus on. I had no chance to start searching Twitter and such. You were on the ground floor because of the Utah Jazz trip to Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Describe, share with us what that moment was like, even if you could talk about how it was a normal day up until that point in that
Sure.
transition.
Yeah, it was definitely the weirdest thing I've ever been a part of coverage-wise. We went into that day expecting things to be a little different because the NBA had already moved to closing locker rooms to anyone but players and essential personnel. So media was not allowed in there. So we had a little bit of a different pregame experience where everything was in a podium setting, whereas usually we do a podium with Billy Donovan, who's the coach of the Thunder, and then we would have done kind of a scrum setting in the hallway with Quinn Snyder, who's the Utah Jazz coach, and then you'd go into the locker room and chat with players who were there, and that's like a much more laid-back atmosphere. And a lot of the times you aren't even doing formal interviews, you're just, checking in and working on that rapport and all of that. So instead we did podium setting with Billy Donovan, podium with Quinn Snyder, podium with Steven Adams, the Thunder center. But other than that, it was completely normal. And especially here in Oklahoma City, at the time, we'd only had 2 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. So we certainly hadn't had the amount of kind of panic that you'd see. My family's all still in Seattle, and so I've talked to them a lot about the perils of grocery shopping. But that hadn't really reached us yet, and we even talked beforehand, like, kind of joking, but like, hey, what if they just move all games to Oklahoma City? Like, we're doing fine. We only have 2 cases. And then my media seats are right behind the scores table. So it's court, scores table, media seats, and everything goes like normal. They go through all of the introductions and everything. And then it's not until the players are walking out onto the court that things become different. And you look up and, like, most of the Thunder players were already out there. Chris Paul had taken a few steps, but, like, everyone had realized, like, hey, the officials aren't in the center, like, ready to start this game. Like, what's going on? Instead, the 3 of them are huddled with Donnie Strack, who's kind of the head of medical personnel for the Thunder. And so at that moment, I think we all started thinking, like, coronavirus, but none of us really wanted to say it. And obviously, we're not going to report that without any actual evidence. So we're all trying to get confirmation or get anyone to put out a statement on what's going on as they're delaying the game. And so they announce that the game has been delayed and start running out the halftime act and they're called the storm chasers here, basically the in-game entertainment who does the t-shirt tosses and all of that. And they had this dance troupe of little kids who were probably supposed to go during some halftime or something, just like one after another while we're still scrambling around. It was super bizarre until finally, after the halftime act finishes his set, they announced that it's been postponed indefinitely, or that the game has been postponed for unforeseen circumstances, and it takes another half an hour or so for the NBA, half an hour, not entirely clear, for the NBA to finally announce, hey, a player has tested positive, which Sean Strania of The Athletic had already reported a little earlier that it was Rudy Gobert. And then they postponed the season. So it was, quite the bizarre night. Definitely not what I was expecting as I took my seat, and definitely one that I will not forget. And then we stayed for until like 1 a.m. because the Jazz still hadn't left because they were all getting tested in the locker room, and that's the longest I have ever been in an arena without basketball being played.
I mean, that is a story. I mean, it sounded like quite the whirlwind and trying to get the bearings straight. And as you talk about too, the interesting thing about being a journalist, right, is having those facts straight. So everyone wants to know immediately what's going on. And like you said, you had to make sure that you guys did too. What was the feeling like after you left the arena, knowing that someone that may have had exposure to many people who you're around with, probably even fellow media members, had
Yeah.
been exposed to the virus?
Um, Definitely wasn't sure what to do. We were told, it wouldn't be a bad idea to quarantine for about 24 hours. All of the Jazz riders had been tested because they obviously had closer contact with Rudy Gobert, and the rest of us just kind of, had to be smart, make sure we were taking our temperature was another thing that we were told, and if, fever cropped up or if we started showing symptoms, that that's obviously something to report. But it was definitely just, you hope for the best and continue your job. And that was the crazy thing too. Like now it's slowed down so much, but immediately after there was so much to write about, what had happened that night, what the league was going to do, what all the fallout was going to be. There was a ton to report on because we still weren't sure about when the Thunder would be tested because they weren't tested that night for coronavirus. They're just, as Royce Young of ESPN first reported, they were just tested for fevers that night. So there was still so much going on, and it wasn't really until the threat was over that you kind of got to take a breath and be like, oh, hey, like, it's a good thing I didn't get that.
No, I wish, I mean, as not just you, clearly everybody, as safe as people can be. This has not been an easy transition, I'm sure, for everybody, including our students who are learning online, because that's a whole different beast and having to take classes on there. She's Maddie Lee, a former Lewis and Clark student athlete, now a beat writer for the Oklahoman. I am going to ask you for your best story while being a student athlete and being a member of the softball team. Before I do you think there will be an NBA season, or do you think we've kind of seen the last NBA game played in 2020?
That's a tough question. I think they're doing everything they can to ensure that they'll be able to play however that looks. I would not be surprised at all. Actually, I'd probably be more surprised if the next season didn't get pushed back than if it doesn't. That was a lot of negatives. Basically, I wouldn't be surprised if the next season gets pushed back in order to make room for the end of this season. But we'll see. It really depends on when they can get back on the court, and once they do, you're trying to figure out the timeline and if they'll be able to do 3-game series, if they can fit in 5, if they have to do some weird sort of tournament style. I really don't know. I really hope that basketball does come back, and we at least get to see a little bit of the rest of this season. But it's hard to predict.
It's certainly a moment. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, if you need me to say, call my shot, I'm going to say yes with next season pushback. But obviously, I can't actually predict that or promise that.
It's certainly a moment in time, for sure, and hopefully as many people can be saved as possible to go through this, and then we'll look back at this 10, 20 years later and say what a crazy, crazy moment. You were a student athlete, Lewis and Clark softball. Best story you had as a student athlete?
Oh, that's so hard. Let's see. I think one of the biggest games that we had was, I have two. and I can't remember which game this one was. It honestly might be the same game. But first of all, little, oh, actually, I don't think it was. I think it was a separate game. Madison Hollenbeck, who was my roommate for years and our pitcher, was a fantastic pitcher. But if you asked her to intentionally walk someone, it was not going to go well. For whatever reason, she got in her head and would just sail it over your head every time. So as a catcher, that was a nightmare. But there was one play where she was asked to intentionally walk the girl, and she completely missed the catcher. I don't think I was catching that game. I think it might have been Lauren Lovato. And the ball happened to hit a pole, like to the side of the backstop, bounce back, and Lauren was able to tag the runner who was trying to steal home. So that was absolutely ridiculous. But then I think probably one of my best memories was, if you look up my playing days, we did not have the best record. I don't think we ever finished the conference better than like second to last. But the first time that my class beat Linfield was fantastic. And Madison was pitching, I was catching, and I remember just throwing the ball straight up after the last pitch, and nothing can compare to that feeling.
I mean, those big wins are certainly memorable. We go through them now, and as softball honestly was quite on a path to possibly a tournament-bound year, it was really disappointing to see the season end before it should have. So we really appreciate taking the time to join us. You can follow her online through Twitter, Maddie_M_Lee. She is Maddie Lee, and she is a beat writer for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Thank you so much. I've been trying to connect with you for 2 years now. And we finally had a chance.
I've been trying. It's those darn back-to-backs.
I know, right? Airplanes and travel. But yeah, we look forward to seeing you on campus sometime soon, too.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Maddie Lee joining us on lcpioneers.com live. I'm Ryan Goff. We invite you to join us tomorrow as we will have more guests. These two coming from the current Lewis and Clark student-athlete world, Kayla Valdez and Mel Ho'omanavanui, as they are two student athletes who are primary planners for the Hawaii Club Luau. That would have happened last weekend. We'll talk to them about the planning that goes into that and how they've adjusted to remote learning. And then on Friday, Morgan Taylor, who is a student athlete for track and field, she was set to compete on Monday and Tuesday next week at the Northwest Conference Championships in the heptathlon. So we'll talk to her about what she is currently doing now that classes have been moved off campus and now that the spring season is canceled. We invite you to join us tomorrow for that at 11:30. We are Thursday through Friday on Facebook Live. Also, a coffee chat with our head volleyball coach, Emily Hayes, tomorrow at noon. You can find out more about that through their social media channels, LC Pios VB, volleyball, VB, and she will update you on what's going on with those coffee chats. Coming up today at 3 o'clock, Lewis and Clark College on Instagram, Instagram Live campus tour with a current student, and then at 4:30, a Q&A with one of our admissions counselors. You can find more about what's going on in the world of virtual visits, trying to stay in touch with everybody by going to lcpioneers.com/YLC. Until we talk to you again tomorrow at 11:30, I'm Ryan Goff. Thanks for having fun with us. We'll have Kayla and Mel tomorrow. And until then, goodbye, everybody, on lcpioneers.com live.
I'm Ann Bentley. I'm an associate professor of chemistry, and in this research group, I supervise the two students working in the Rogers program this summer in our lab. The brown bag experience is a good chance for students to get experience presenting their work that they've done in the lab, especially to an audience that's not technical.
What's intriguing about the brown bag experience is it incorporates all of the Rogers programs. So I'm able to hear people in the psychology department and what research they're doing, but it also gives us the opportunity to share our research with the greater science community at Lewis and Clark. And for incoming students, the summer program is really beneficial for getting opportunity in research. So I've had the opportunity for research in the past, but other students may not have the same opportunities. So it's nice to work in a professional lab setting and potentially have the opportunity to publish a paper, which looks really good moving on into doing professional research out in the field.
The students grow a lot during the summer in their ability to learn the techniques and apply the techniques and suggest their own ideas for what could come next and interpret their data. It's just a big, usually if they haven't done research before, they learn a lot in that short period of time.
My favorite spot on campus is like right outside the Dovecote, little benches and there's flowers growing there and you can get a little coffee at the Dovecote and sit there.
My favorite spot on campus is definitely the weight room. I get that everybody loves like the gardens or the manor house, but our facilities for athletics here are actually amazing too, and the weight room is definitely my favorite spot.
My favorite spot on campus would either be the glade outside of the athletic facilities or South Campus.
What is my favorite spot on campus? I really like the back porch of the manor house. It looks out on Mount Hood, and on a clear day, it's super beautiful just to sit around with friends.